Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 809. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. You know what we do on race weekends. Of course you do.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do on race weekends. And this weekend, we're reviewing the Sao Paulo Grand Prix in Brazil. But before doing that, I actually have to bring in my co-host who actually knows what he's talking about.
Ripped from out of the
That's
wasteland.
right.
He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul, how you doing?
I'm good. Yes.
Good.
It was an exciting weekend.
It was an exciting weekend. I agree. An exciting race.
Yes, the young Dutchman was a bit annoying out there today.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So you got that going for you this weekend. I would imagine we'll be talking about that. And
Yeah, we might
you
mention
had
a
a-
little Dutchman.
you had a little a racing activity, a little Aston Martin Heart of Racing a program going on. And
Yeah, we did a female driver search competition this
Yeah.
last week in Phoenix.
had a lot of
And,
great drivers.
a lot of great drivers.
Yeah.
I mean, it really blew our socks off, actually, how good they were. They came from New Zealand, from Canada, from Sweden. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. The level was very high, all across the board, all of them. So we had
Was it
9.
interesting to hear sort of, let me ask you this, was it interesting to hear, were there varying paths to motorsport in different series? Did they all come pretty much to karting to open wheel? Were some of them karting to tin tops?
Karting was it.
Karting, yeah.
was it, except for maybe one of them. No, actually, they're all got karting backgrounds and all had karting success. Championships, wins, all that
Yeah,
kind
right.
of stuff. And most of them, you say, were like, "Well, how long have you been driving?" Since I was 6.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, it was they're nearly pros by the time they get to us, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
we had a range of like 16 to 22-year-olds. So yeah, still young, but just solid, drivers, and their approach to racing was super serious.
Yeah.
If you forgot in the end that it was just female drivers, it was just race car drivers
Yeah.
driving their
Yeah.
asses off to try and get a
Right.
ride, and it was good. It was a good 2 days. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
I'm
hard
sure
racing
all of them
did a great job. We had 3 GT4 cars running basically all day
all
long.
day. Yeah.
The Astons, and so it was an impeccable job by the team to keep them running and giving everyone a nice level playing field. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sure you had a whole host of leadfoots there.
Yeah. It was fun. It was fun. I kind of helped develop the whole program, and I've done. If you remember, a long time ago, I did Future Driver when I was out
Yeah.
in Sonoma, and so
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun. Also looking for young drivers, and so I used that experience to kind of put something together so everyone had a fair chance.
Yeah.
And crack of the whip, and it was so close between so many of them. So we're still deciding. We've still got some meetings this week to try and figure out who's going to actually get the ride with the harder racing team next year, because it definitely isn't a slam dunk for anybody. So
Yeah. So I guess, and unlike Formula One, these meetings don't consist of, all right, so how much money is she bringing? And then how much
Yes.
money is she bringing to the program? Okay, so
Yeah.
this one's bringing the most. Here's our new driver.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, that's one of the privileges of being on this team, right?
Yeah.
It's funded from the top down, not from the bottom up. So the drivers don't bring money. We get to really literally just pick the driver we want. So
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Did you manage to squeeze in the Sao Paulo Grand Prix this weekend?
I did. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Crawley race was finally good.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Yeah.
track is phenomenal, right? It's a fun track
Yeah.
to ride around on the inboards. It's a fun track to see people race side by side with each other, and I think it gave us everything this weekend, really.
Yeah. It's a fun track, exciting, generally produces some exciting stuff.
Hmm.
Remember that big crash down the straight? Was that Fissy?
Oh, well, a few of them had it. Weber had a big one too,
Weber had
didn't
a
he?
big one.
Yeah.
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 It was a Jordan. I remember a yellow car.
Nico Rondet had a big one.
Did he?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, not good. That's
No. When
that's
you go
dangerous.
big.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. So, well, let's talk about the Sao Paulo Grand Prix,
Okay.
also confused with the term Brazilian Grand Prix. Let's set the table, shall we? Let's do a little table setting here. Right out of the box, Mercedes looked quick, and that was never more evident than when George won the final sprint race of the season by passing Max, who was on a set of mediums. But I think you and I were texting. I'm not even sure Max could have held him off. He was on the softs.
Yeah.
Even with DRS, right? Wasn't convinced of that. As such, Merck started 1-2. Carlos had that grid penalty for an engine change, so that left George Russell on pole position, followed by Lewis Hamilton on Sunday. Leaving the big question was, did Red Bull have an answer this weekend? Friday's qualifying was led by Haas F1's Kevin Magnussen. That was great, who managed to get a quick lap in before the rain fell. But in fairness to Kevin, he converted that to a point, right, out of the sprint race. So good for Haas. They needed that point. That was great.
I was surprised he didn't fight a little harder, though.
I think he was in total car management, just bring it home for a point.
Right. It's a couple of times I would have thought, knowing the way Kevin drives, he would have fought a little tighter. But
apparently that was Daniel this weekend. Zing. Yeah. Paul, it seemed to me, and I think the world over, I think when queried, I think it seemed to me that the sprint race was a lot more exciting. But here's my take on it. It's a lot of people running around digitally shoving this sprint race in everyone's nose and see, sprint races are awesome. And I think there's some context to that because fewer people had anything to lose.
Right.
So given that the titles are all won and everything's done and dusted,
well,
I think,
except for the likes of Alpine and McLaren.
Yeah, but they weren't burning it up during the sprint race. Alpine was trying to take each other out. Which was a disaster, right?
It was, yes.
And therefore, and to my point, Kevin Magnussen didn't want to throw it away either. They still needed the point, every point they can get. But at the sharp end of the grid, there's less to lose there. You want the series to pay points and make it part of the weekend or the system, and I understand. I just wonder if there's maybe a little more elegant way to do a sprint race to ensure that everyone's kind of going for it. Because I think in the past what we've seen is the first lap or two to establish a running order and everybody starts managing, from there on. At least that's what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see, when we talked about it before, that's kind of what we're expecting. I think you're probably right. It's near the end of the season. It's kind of like near the last day of school, everyone's getting closer. There is stuff on the line. There's a lot of stuff on the line. There's a lot of money on the line, but I think the general feeling is everyone's ready to get the season over, and this is I think just subconsciously they're a little looser out there driving wise, which then shows us a good race, right? So how do you structure it so the sprint race isn't just a survival instinct to not screw up, which is what it's been in the past. Don't make a mistake, so you can hold the grid position that you actually drove for in the qualifying position.
Right.
How do you do that? Because if it impacts your starting position, the only way is to take that out of the equation. So
I'm not anti-sprint race. I'm just wondering if there's not a little more elegant way to.
I think there is, and I think if they found a way to make it, as I said, not a protectionary race, and let them drive a little bit more with a little more abandon, then we would probably be more pro qualifying race. Up until this race, it's kind of been a pointless bore, really, for me. Anyway.
I agree. Sunday was much warmer and sunny. Lots of discussion about tire degradation, but it became clear that really Red Bull was struggling all weekend, really, with tire deg, in particular front end grip. It seemed like the front end start to lose, the back end shoving the front around, and that's really where they were struggling. And even the soft, clearly the preferred tire at this track, more so than the medium, but even with the softs, they still seemed to be struggling, whether that was getting and finding and staying within that window of grip and not overworking the tire. It was difficult to know. It would suggest that also for Mercedes, it definitely suggests that the upgrades they did in Austin helped quite a bit. And the track certainly flattered them as well. Nothing wrong with that, and that's not a knock on Mercedes. Their updates in Austin seem to pay dividends, which is bodes well going into next year. If you consider Mercedes' qualifying pace on Friday, what were they down in eighth and I don't know, third, fourth, somewhere around that, fifth,
Yeah.
somewhere around that. So that was sheer one lap pace on Friday versus how they performed in the sprint run, which set Sunday's grid, and then how they performed on Sunday. I think you could see that over one lap, maybe they still weren't the quickest out there, but over
Yeah.
the race and in racing conditions, they had their tire window really dialed in.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and it seemed like that's where Mercedes really got their, got to stretch their legs. So when you're running for a bit. And
Yeah. I mean, we've seen it, with the Ferrari for sure. And I think this
Yeah.
weekend with the Red Bull was the new tires mask the problems for
Yeah.
a little while. And
Right.
then, but definitely Mercedes were extremely strong
Yeah.
and had the race in their hand, really. And that's why they ended up with the result they did, which, yeah, I mean, absolutely looks good for them finally figuring out, because they've been suffering pretty bad, but
Yeah.
they've gradually clawed their way back. And that's part of the fun of Formula One,
Yeah.
to see the team's technologies and effort behind,
Right.
the races to come back and figure out what they did wrong at the beginning of the season.
Right. Well, let's talk about it. Mercedes ends up taking the victory. Lewis Hamilton in P2. And that was weird, Paul. Right in the middle of this podcast, my camera died.
I think it was the space-time continuum.
Yeah, I think it
There's a rip
was.
in time or something.
My camera didn't.
Wales?
My camera didn't move over for me. I was like, well, come on. I was nice to you in Monaco. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
So I had to switch this backup camera. Anyway, let's talk about Mercedes. Shall we do? Apologize to your viewers. That would have been a stark weirdness. And for the listeners, that would have been a complete disjoiner. But anyway, we forge on because we're professionals. We rise above it.
Definitely
all right.
Rising.
Lewis Hamilton, P2, George Russell in P1. George dominated the entire weekend, winning the sprint race, leading the entire Grand Prix, managing 2 safety car restarts in the process, which isn't always easy.
Tricky.
For his first ever win in Formula One. So, huge kudos, a great weekend for George. Looked on pace pretty much all weekend. I was going back looking, I went back and looked early this morning. I was trying to see if there was some difference between setups and stuff like that. It did, because I had read on, I think it was Mark Hughes said that maybe George had less downforce than Lewis, but I don't know if that was on race day or if it was in sprint. But anyway, if there were slight variations, apparently George also nursed a water leak. He had a water leak, but the team didn't tell him. For half the race, about middle of the race, I guess he started having a water leak, and they didn't tell him. And Toto said he wasn't quite sure if they'd make it to the end, but they did. So anything, and I thought it was interesting, just an interesting note to me. I think the Sky commentary group, discussed a little bit too, but it was how much the commentary and weekend was still, very Lewis centric, because he got that honorary citizenship with Brazil. The Brazilians love Lewis.
Yeah, he needs to work on his Portuguese though. If you're
Yes,
going to be an citizen, you got. I'm not sure, because he started saying stuff in Portuguese and no one really reacted. So I'm like, what's he saying? Is he saying, "I am a hamburger"? I don't know. What is he saying?
I'm a jelly donut. Yeah. Right. So, but it was a very Lewis centric weekend. Even when really the winning driver of the day is, he won that at F1.com, and I thought, wow, you're voted driver of the day. I mean, George dominated the entire weekend.
Yeah.
Alonso had an incredible recovery drive, right? And I didn't get that. I didn't understand it. But whatever. The other interesting element though for me was the team telling George when he radioed, he says, "All right, so we're gonna finish 1-2."
Yeah.
Meaning we hold station, we finish 1-2, right? And the team very just bluntly came back and said, No, that's not what we're doing. Just keep it clean. And don't hit each other. Meaning Lewis is completely free to race, right?
Right.
Now, maybe that was some made for public kind of radio message, and that's fine. The team doesn't want to seem like they're issuing team orders all the time. But I'm surprised a little that they would do that to the driver who had
Mm,
been leading the drivers' championship all year long for them, delivered most of the team championship points all year long in aggregate for the team, and is staring down the barrel of his first win ever in
mm-hmm.
F1. Um, I get it. Mercedes has been good to George. Uh, but I feel even regardless of what he's done in 2022, if he's not worth getting behind on something like this, then
Yeah.
if I'm George, I'd be keeping one eye open for another team just in case. It's a little
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah, it
Um,
is. I would.
let me say this, and I'll let you jump
Okay.
in. But before you get upset with me and say that the team's not reducing itself to silly things like team orders, you might also be the same person who is on social media completely outraged because Max didn't follow his, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, weigh that in your own mind. But, George's first win is, that's a great thing. Um, I don't know. Does it seem a little odd to you? But I'm not going to make a mountain out of a molehill here, but I just thought that was a little weird.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah. It's interesting. I've been listening to the radio comms between George and the team, and everything I'm reading into it is that George knows that Lewis has his feet at the desk, as you always like to say,
Yeah.
and he's being very careful in the words he uses and when he uses them, and not these, yes sir, no sir, because he's definitely not that way.
No.
He's just being very smart in how he approaches his political stance with the team, not giving them a position to push back on what he's saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's also, I think, making his point heard that what he wants to do and how he wants to do it. It'd be very easy to fall back into the number two role, as we've seen happen so often to
Yeah.
people. And I think George all year has known that that's something that could be a peril, and has done everything he can to avoid falling into that role. And
Yeah.
some of the things he said here in Brazil were definitely not necessarily things he was expecting the team to agree with, but things that he wanted to put his point across in a formula, and knowing that it goes out to the whole world also. He's not naive, thinking it's just an internal conversation.
Right. Yeah, he's
Right.
putting marker down. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's setting himself up for success, and he's setting
Yeah.
himself up not to be fast for a number two. So I think he drove brilliantly this weekend.
Yeah.
But I also he's playing a very difficult game coming into a team of a 7-time world champion who's
Oh,
very,
sure.
very difficult game. You're treading on eggshells sometimes with teams and with your co-driver, etc.
Yeah.
So he's not a warm and cuddly guy, George. I
No.
mean, I know he's for the team and everything, but he knows he's got to be kind of Rosberg like in
Mm-hmm.
that he maybe has to say and do things he wouldn't come natural to him, but he knows he has to do to put him a good stance for this year and next year and the years beyond.
Yeah, you could draw. It's a great point, Paul. And like I said, I'm not outraged by it. I just found it kind of interesting, given that this is the guy
Yeah.
that's delivered the team all the points and leading the drivers' championship and is on the verge of winning his first race. I think, could they afford him a win? Yeah. It's not going to cost Lewis anything.
Right.
I found that kind of odd, but it would go a long way to boost, confidence, morale, team dynamic with George, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a little strange, but
I think it's less about helping George and more about keeping Lewis satisfied.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Which is ultimately my point. But you could compare and contrast. When Lewis entered the sport, he did it elbows out, with Alonso. I mean, he made no bones about it, right? Sebastian Vettel, multi 21. Um, Lewis, the pit box incident, and many others within McLaren.
Yeah.
Um, So he did it in a very aggressive elbow out way to knock Alonso's feet off the desk. Then you've got Rosberg did it in a very aggressive way to try to knock Lewis's feet off the desk, right? Did it for one season, but that's about all he had the stuffing for. Then you've got Valtteri Bottas come in, try to very politely be a great teammate, ended up being basically a wingman, right?
Yeah.
For Lewis, right? And so you have these different ways that they approach it. And now maybe George is going to outthink us all. Maybe he's going to have just the right amount of politeness with just the right amount of sharp elbow.
Right.
I
think that's exactly how he's playing. He's seen these scenarios growing up. He's seen, he's been a young kid looking at Lewis and how he's won his championships, and he's seen the teammates, and he's learned, the mistakes that they made. And
right.
Yeah. And as you say, just that enough edge, but not enough to cause a big turmoil within the team yet. Because right now they're not really racing against each other for championship.
Right.
That could change very soon.
Right. Yeah. If they were in a situation, a year or two ago, like Valtteri and Lewis, that could change. Right. Yeah, you're right. Now, in fairness to Lewis, I'm not, taking a ball back to Lewis. I mean, he had a strong recovery to second. And he was very magnanimous publicly about George's first win, was super excited for George, happy, more happy for the team as you would be, first win of the year. I'm sure he would have liked to give him Mercedes the first win, but as it is, happy for George, happy for the team, move in the right direction. I will say, and we'll cover this here instead of Red Bull, I will say, Paul, but about the altercation between Lewis and Max, right, at turn 2. When that happened, I will say that in no part of my head was there a thought of a penalty that would be coming for Max.
Right.
Regarding their altercation at the restart into turn 2. It never crossed my mind, as I thought, at worst, I was thinking it was, basically a racing incident, because I saw Ocon pass Stroll a few laps later exactly the same way. He was on the outside. He wasn't ahead of Stroll going into turn 2. He was a little behind the front right wheel of Stroll, hit the apex, took a lot of curb right there, just like Max did. Stroll gave him enough room. They both exited. Ocon got the pass done. And I was like Martin Brundle. I think Lewis could have gave him more room. This whole year, all I've heard is fans screaming at the tops of their lungs and the top of their voice that you have to leave a cars with. You have it. Well, Lewis didn't leave a full cars with. It wasn't there. The door closed hard. And so there was no part of me that was thinking there was a penalty coming. I thought they would chalk it up as a racing incident, to be honest with you. I didn't think in Brazil they'd be handing out penalties to Lewis either. I don't think it was that kind of coming together, but it turns into this penalty for Max, which I found completely bizarre. And, the two drivers, I think it was basically two drivers unyielding in a racing incident at best. And yet it's another reason I think Derek Warwick needs to be a guest steward at fewer Grand Prix, to be honest with you. I think he's
it wasn't Derek again, was it?
It was Derek again. And you find these kind of odd calls and weirdness when Derek's at the helm. I'm sorry. I don't know Derek. I'm sure he's a delightful guy. But he's definitely a Lewis fan and not a big Max fan. And you find these kind of things. I'm just saying, you can go back and look at some of these, and Derek was there,
It does seem to be a familiar.
It is. Yeah, it is. Despite that, I also found it odd that the teams are complaining now all the time about all the online hate that they're getting, right? I thought it was a little strange that Mercedes would immediately, right after Lewis's radio call, accusing or saying that's not a racing incident, man.
Yeah.
Insinuating he did it on purpose, right? Immediately, Mercedes is tweeting that out, right?
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
I thought that was weird. And sort of, insinuating it was deliberate. Merck know all too well that this is simply getting the loud hailer out and calling the mobocracy to arms at this point. All the teams know this. but they did it anyway to set the narrative in the court of public opinion, the public cesspool opinion. Um, and I just would have expected Mercedes to take the high road on that instead of start tweeting that out
Yeah.
and trying
Well,
to.
you know, you can't control the social media people in your
Yeah,
team.
right.
They're
Yeah,
just
right.
they're carte blanche to do whatever they want.
Yeah, we all
Uh,
heard Lewis. It's a heat of the moment. He's pissed off. I get it. And I
yeah,
understand. And, if I was Lewis, I'd be mad too. And, his comment, well, it's
right.
Max. What are you going to do about it? But, I don't think that was 100% Max's deal. And I thought tweeting that out and instantly all of the hate and all that stuff,
Hmm.
they're just fueling it. They're setting the narrative and they're working their platform. And if the teams want to bitch and moan about getting all the online hate, then stop it. Stop it.
Yeah,
You can
stop
stop
stirring
it.
it up. Yeah.
Take the high road, you know?
Well, it's interesting though, because I mean, obviously, in the middle of the race, do you think the social media person is calling Toto saying, "Is this okay?"
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You know,
Not.
it's honestly, I know you're saying, well, Mercedes are stirring up. It's really just individual social media
Yeah.
workers for a team thinking this is okay and that okay. I'm not sure, which is why you hold back, in my
Right.
opinion, where
Yes, you should.
you don't
Yes.
let these people just carte blanche and go rogue and start typing things away in with your name behind it, right?
Right. Well, those tweets are not just representing them, it's
Mhm.
representing Mercedes, it's
Yeah.
representing Lewis, it's representing all of Mercedes sponsors,
Hmm.
it's representing a lot. And there's a lot
Yeah.
at stake there, given the amount of online hate and what we've seen in retribution with canceling and everything else going on. And I would think that
Right.
teams would not hand their social media. I'm not saying Mercedes social media person is this, but I have seen this in the past. Oh, it's a new technology, and they hand it to a 20 something.
Yeah.
You're tying your entire multi-million-dollar brand
Yeah. Yeah.
to the brain of a 20 something. No offense to you 20 somethings out there, but
Yeah.
if you're not there cutting the sponsorship deals for $200 million, maybe you ought to at least think about it before you tweet
Hmm.
something.
Yeah.
I'm just
No,
saying.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I get it. And as
Yeah.
for the incident, yeah, I agree. I don't see a penalty there at all. I think you want to give Lewis a bit. I'd give Lewis a bit more percentage, just
Which is, yeah,
because
that's what Martin
he was
said
the
too.
one that
Yeah.
was. I mean, Max completely brave move on the outside. Absolutely what we want to see in racing. He was all the way over. I read. Let me see if I can bring it up. If I can shrink my window. Pardon my French. When they were talking about what the rule was, right?
Mhm.
And there was nothing in that rule to me that dictates that it should have been a penalty. I mean, it was
Mhm.
like you got to be alongside. He was pretty much alongside. I mean,
Oh,
I know I say
clearly
pretty much,
there.
but enough alongside enough where that's not a legitimate place to turn in at that point.
Yeah.
You got to give up. Sometimes you have to give up. He got on the outside. He got enough alongside where it doesn't warrant a turn-in point, and Lewis turned in and squeezed him. He was all the way on the curb. It wasn't like he held stations. And for me, it was actually lucky that Max didn't back off, which is what they said they
Mm.
gave him the penalty for, that he was carrying too much speed into the apex. If he'd have backed off any at that moment in time, then it would have been left front to right rear, and Lewis would have
Right.
been up in the air.
Spun.
And
Yeah.
we've seen that, right? So
Yeah.
it was lucky that was side by side contact. But we want to see racing.
Yeah.
It's like, do we just want everyone to run around each other? I mean, there's going to be a point in time, that racing is fun when you watch them really, really, bounce into each other a little bit and have a little rough
Yeah.
and tumble. And those guys have the massive history. I
They
mean,
do.
they're not going to give up. I know you use the Ocon and Stroll example. Not that Stroll's been innocent for the most part.
No S sub.
But they've got a different history than does
Yes.
Lewis
Yes.
and Max. And
But both of them, Ocon, notoriously aggressive.
yeah,
He just ran Alonso off the road the day before, and
right.
Stroll,
Yeah.
notoriously aggressive, just ran Seb off the road the day
Yes.
before.
Yeah.
And how two super aggressive guys went into that turn and didn't hit each other is my point. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's what I was reading in the guidelines. In order for a driver overtaken on the inside to be given sufficient room, it had to have a significant portion of the car alongside.
Which
I
he
would say
did.
that was significant. The overtaken maneuver must be done in a safe and controlled manner. Not really sure what that means. Verstappen attempted to pass Hamilton on the outside of turn 1 by braking very late. Well, that's what you do.
That's what you
He
do.
did not complete the pass in turn 1, and his excess speed compromised his entry into turn 2, at which point he made contact with Hamilton. Completely untrue. His speed didn't have any compromise to his entry to 2. He was at the apex of 2. It wasn't like he had like we've seen in a few occasions where you come in too hot, you miss the apex, and you run wide, like happened with Lando and Leclerc.
And Leclerc. That's exactly what I was going to say.
What happened.
That's what happened.
And you take responsibility for losing control of the car. Max had full control of the car at that point. He wasn't sliding out, wasn't understeering, wasn't oversteering. He was just in a place that Lewis didn't want him to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how I saw it too. I don't understand. That's why I'm saying that is a really weird call.
Yeah.
And you can be a Lewis fan or a Mercedes fan, and you're not going to disappoint Lewis if you think that's a bit of an odd call. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it is an odd call.
And as I said, it just sets a precedent that
we don't want to do there.
We don't want to be. We want people to make those moves. We want to be
do.
excited about the move. We're not just waiting for the DRS pass and everyone to be 10 feet away from each other.
Yes.
Else it's not a legitimate passing opportunity.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So anyway, that's what we think about that. Let's talk about Ferrari, shall we? I mean, why not? No! Let's do it. Going to talk about Ferrari. Charles Leclerc, P6, Carlos Sainz. No, is that right? No. Did I not change the finishing positions on this?
I don't know. I never read your
you shouldn't.
Notes,
no, you totally shouldn't. They're always wrong.
I think Sainz was 3rd, I believe.
Sainz was 3rd and 4th. No, 5th.
Yeah. 3rd and 4th, because
it was 3rd and 4th.
5th.
Yes, it was. Oh, sorry, my dog got excited about that. He's pissed that I missed it. 4th, yes, 4th and 3rd is what I should be saying. I'm making changes to my notes. So anyway, important. It is important, man. All right, so I got to get this right, Paul. So Charles Leclerc, P4, Carlos Sainz, P3. Carlos had a terrific recovery drive after having that grid penalty I mentioned for an engine change. Then he had that unscheduled stop due to an overheating brake because there was a tear off, I think, in the brake duct.
Yep.
So he had that overheating. Ted was very worried about that, as he should be. He made it up to P3 by taking advantage of the safety car. This is a critical element. So that late safety car came out. They brought him in. He dove in the pit, seated position, got fresh tires on, got some new shoes, went out to run down Perez, despite being on a 3-stopper, and still ended up taking 3rd. It was a great race for Carlos.
Yeah, it was. All round, he was very competitive this weekend, wasn't he? In the sprint race, everything. So he was kind of had the upper hand on Charles this weekend.
Yeah,
so it was good that he got the result out of it. I think the Ferrari was pretty good car here, actually. They were a little unlucky, obviously, with Charles getting knocked out, but they were about the only people that could fight with the Mercedes, or had a chance to this weekend anyway.
Right.
And Carlos seemed to be the guy that was going to be able to do it, and I think
did.
it came fairly close. It was 3 seconds, 4 seconds maybe gap by the end. So yeah, it wasn't too shabby a weekend for Ferrari, considering the track does have degradation, considering they're using just mediums and softs. I think that was actually a step forward for Ferrari as well as for Mercedes.
I do too, given how much they've struggled with degradation over the entirety of the season, right?
Yeah.
So that worked out. So if you're a Ferrari fan, you're excited.
This is Enzo Ferrari.
Sure is Enzo Ferrari. Let's talk about Charles. Charles had a good recovery drive, considering he got punted into the wall. I thought he was out.
Yeah.
Managed to get it back in the race, and didn't it looked like a pretty hard hit. I thought there might be more damage than
right. You've seen drivers sneeze and break more stuff than he did.
Yeah. So pretty durable car there. And he had just been lucky the way he entered the wall, but anyway, still managed to stay in, managed to keep going, and finished all the way up in P4. Like Carlos, he also benefited from the safety car, took his Ferrari up to P4. While I thought it was kind of funny, he was asking the team, to issue team orders
Yeah.
that would deny Carlos a podium so Charles could get a few more points to be second in the drivers' championship. So if you didn't think that it matters to them, and they all say it doesn't, but it absolutely does matter to them.
It was too dangerous was the call from Ferrari, right?
Yeah, which is the right call. I think that's
you
a
don't pull
tall
someone
ask.
off the podium for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's
fifth or sixth, or seventh or eighth, but not the podium.
And as much as Max had egg on the face out of the weekend, I think Charles had a little egg on the face there. Dude, I get it. You're going to second, but come on, man. You're asking to pull Carlos off a well-earned three-stopper to make it to the podium. Come on, man.
Yeah.
So anyway, but his performance, however, and Max's performance does bring him on level with Sergio Perez on the second in the drivers' championship. So and because they're tied on points, actually Charles is ahead because he has more race wins than Sergio does. Sergio says that Monaco, which started it all.
Oh, geez, here we go.
Oh boy. All right, let's talk about let's see. Normally I was gonna say Red Bull. I was gonna talk about Alpine. That's right, Fernando. Okay, so this is P9, P5, P8. Alonso on P5, Esteban Ocon P8. Alpine had a tough qualifying and an even worse sprint race. I mean, Ocon was, they were like, oh my gosh, they took all this hate, and Alpine had to release a statement and said, we ain't putting up with all the hate. We ain't doing it. We ain't doing it, right? So they were very upset with social media reaction about the whole thing, and everybody was just aghast at what Ocon did to Alonso and shoving him off. And I'm thinking, did anybody remember when Ocon was Perez's teammate at Force India? Good Lord.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys are taking each other on. It's just Ocon. He puts a helmet on. His car's 20 feet wide. He's not letting anybody through. He'll bang wheels with it. It's just Ocon, right? So he had that clash with Alonso on Saturday. They redeemed themselves, though, by keeping it clean on Sunday.
But Alonso got the penalty for it.
Because then Alonso hit Ocon.
Yeah.
After Ocon shoved him off, then Alonso come up behind him, misjudged it, broke his front wing off, and it was all a hot mess, man. Otmar, you could tell, was just clearly not happy with his drivers, are very upset. So anyway, but they redeemed themselves on Sunday. They kept it clean. Alonso made up 11 places to finish in P5. A terrific race for him.
Yeah.
Man, it just once again is, when you think, he's kind of running back there, he's got a midfield car. You keep, you kind of forget about Alonso back there. Man, he hasn't lost anything.
He is relentless, man. I mean, he's the most fun if you want to go have fun riding around in a Formula One car in a race. He's the most fun to ride along with because he just doesn't give up. He's like Tasmanian devil. I don't know
he's like
what
a Jack Russell Terrier. He's just on you.
He's just on it, and he's finding a way past it. It's phenomenal how he's kept that drive with him in it, and it hasn't gone, and his skill level apparently hasn't gone either. So fantastic drive by Alonso.
Well, and with Esteban and P8, both McLarens out of the race, a huge point haul for Alpine, for a team who are now, because of that, folks, they're 19 points ahead of McLaren in the Constructors' Championship for best of the rest.
That is amazing, right?
It's amazing. It's a great result for this team.
So they were down and out, and they've really...
I know. They've pulled it back, due to McLaren's bad luck and reliability.
Alonso has a little wry smile beating McLaren.
I would imagine.
Him out.
I would imagine.
You can retire now, Fernando.
Right. Yeah. And you got to think Zach's sitting there thinking, where would we be if Daniel would have been thereabouts all year,
Yeah.
So Esteban had a moment when they reminded him not to fight with Alonso during a restart.
Having a little bit of a fit.
He didn't take that well.
No.
And he's like, no, leave me alone. I got to get past Vettel. Well, so does Alonso, and he's on fresher tires, right?
Yeah.
So he didn't hold Alonso up, didn't fight him. Alonso benefited from the safety car as well. So that helped him. He was able to hold Verstappen off actually at the end. So great race for the team and Alonso.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the car had to be good anyway.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
right.
yes, they made great luck and skill on the strategy, but
Yeah,
ultimately the Alpine was pretty handy. It just didn't show itself
yeah,
in the qualifying race. So
right.
yeah, they earned it.
Let's see. Red Bull, Sergio Perez on P7, Max Verstappen on P6. Not much to talk about Red Bull. Let's talk about Alfa Romeo. Oh, we're gonna cover Red Bull. So Max had a good start, but had that coming together with Lewis on the restart after the first safety car. Clash caused wing damage for him, a penalty for him, 5-second penalty, and this left him pretty much at the back of the field. But he made an impressive recovery drive via very quick laps and some good strategy that got him back past his teammate on fresh, because Max had fresher tires, got past Perez on the fresher tires, and then was told to give the position back at the last lap. He refused to do that. But hold that thought. Let's discuss that in a minute. Let's talk about Sergio, and then we'll dive into the team order thing. So Max's race there. Sergio also lacked pace all weekend, but was in the hunt for a podium. But late in the race on mediums, he was just kind of a sitting duck, really, at that point by the guys that boxed Leclerc, Sainz, and Lewis, which is a great call by their team. He lost a few positions, dropped him behind Leclerc, then down to P6. Max passed him. Then Max didn't see the position. This left him in P7. He was furious with Max, saying, "This shows what he's like. I've helped him. I've done so much for him, and he screws me over." Effective, I'm putting words in his mouth, but it goes along that. So that leaves us, Paul. The weekend, it was all spent bashing Max for hitting Lewis and then for ignoring team orders, after all Perez had done to help Max in the past.
Which is a lot.
Yeah. So what became a little interesting is right after that, even right after the race, I think Ted mentioned it, Martin Brundle mentioned it, this incident in Monaco became more in focus. And now I've read more articles at Motorsport Magazine, different places that you would typically go, about what happened in Monaco. And the possible reason that Max ignored the order and scolded the team for asking it seemed to be about an incident in Monaco that saw Perez take pole position and the win in Monaco while Max languished in third. And some say that Sergio's P3 crash was on purpose. So if that's true, I'm not sure. I'd be mad too. And I don't know, maybe you didn't let him by. But the reality is, if that's true, I think, let me put it this way. I think possibly, let's just assume, give him the benefit of the doubt, assume that something happened in Monaco that Sergio did that screwed Max, right? If that's true, I think what happened and what we saw, Paul, is a very public retribution for something that was really a very internal, private issue.
Yeah.
So when it manifests itself so publicly like that by Max, we only heard one side of the story, and it didn't look good for Max at all.
Right.
Because you didn't know the other side of the story, right? Now, you could say, well, even if that wasn't the thing, even though I may know the other side of the story, it's still a bad look. And I would agree with you. I think, Paul, at the end of the day, Max kind of shit the bed on this one because he didn't lose anything. And letting Sergio get by him is not that big of a deal to keep harmony within the team. And to be real blunt, if there was this lingering issue from Monaco, the team should have solved this a long time ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
They should not have let this linger out there, the team should have solved it. Max should have let Sergio back by. But you brought up a good point before this. Why should Max have let him by?
Why? Well, I mean, obviously Max has a temperament. He's, as you like to say, no champions don't play wet nurse to anybody. But
nope. Multi-21.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree that the team is an internal issue that the team should have taken care of long ago.
Yeah.
Is this really something that's been sticking in Max's craw the whole season? This is the only first chance he's come to be able to give retribution for an apparent thing that Perez did at Monaco. I'm sure Perez, if it's true, I don't know. If it's true, I'm sure it was not Perez against Verstappen. It was Perez trying to be successful on
Perez
his own.
for Perez.
You
Yeah.
could say that's a bad, that's bad form, bad
Yeah.
sportsmanship. We've seen Schumacher do the same thing. It's Perez is in a difficult position where his chances to succeed and be able to win a race outright are few and far between because all the backing is behind Max,
Right,
rightfully
sure.
so, right? But for Max, I think he's made a massive error in that what this is going to do within the team and what's it going to do with Sergio for the future. I mean, Sergio's been his wingman.
Yeah.
And Sergio, will win a race when he can, is happy to do it. But also Sergio is also happy to be a team player. We saw him do that at his
Abu
previous
Dhabi.
team also. But definitely with this team, I mean, he's been brought on. He's got the pace to back Max up, and he's got the temperament and compliance within the team to back Max up.
That's
when
right.
the team wants him to. And this is a very bad move by Max because he's not going to get that again.
Right.
Whether it's an open, out in the open that Sergio's not going to, next time when, Sergio has to fight like bull to hold somebody off for Max, maybe he won't fight so hard.
He probably wouldn't.
Maybe he won't fight like he did with Lewis again. Lewis will be by after one turn rather than three. And no one's going to know that except Sergio. And I think it's doing Max harm to himself in
I agree.
performing in this way.
I think there's a level of maturity here, you know, and a bigger picture to see. I think for Max, I understand you may be hurt by whatever's perceived to have happened, Mike. Let's just assume it was all true.
Yeah.
Even if it was, even if he, ran wide and touched the wall and stopped in Portier and then took the win. Okay. That is crappy. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side of it, that entire team is built around you. And there will be times in the future that you need the team to issue team orders. You need a wingman. And you need a wingman to do exactly what Sergio did to Lewis in Abu Dhabi last year.
Mm-hmm.
Not just kind of weave around and let Lewis by, but to repass, to go after him and hold him up as much as humanly possible. Right. So if that's the case, you got to think long term, instead of doling out punitive actions for something that happened in Monaco because you're still butthurt about it. Think about your future and going forward in the long term. You are comfortably positioned in that team and you need Sergio. So throw Sergio a bone.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, I gave him Monaco. Well, no, Sergio kind of gave him Monaco, and it wasn't maybe most tastefully done, but on the flip side of it, you got to think big picture here. And so, I think he fell down on this one. I think now, does he deserve all the crap that's on social media and everybody, going on and all that? No. And, Mexico's all pissed off and everybody's outraged and everybody's furious. And it's, that's an overreaction. I mean, Sergio's a pro, he'll get over it and move on. And I think in Abu Dhabi, if Max has an opportunity to help Sergio, he's going to. I think Christian's made that clear. But look, at the end of the day, we can sit and get pissed off with, Sergio or what Max didn't do in Brazil. But I gotta be honest with you, if this was a lingering, festering wound with Max, then the team probably should have addressed it a long time ago.
Yeah. And Max needs to look out inside himself too at things he's done in his past. He's not been, the innocent little angel.
Clean.
There's times he's made decisions on the track, whether against Lewis or other people, where he knew what the outcome was going to be.
Yeah. Just ask Nico Rosberg.
Crazy Max was after that, so can't let anybody pass.
Right? Nico.
Yeah. Yeah. So contact or whatever, he's not, as I said, he's not an innocent bunny. He's done things premeditated as well. It just didn't come out for him that time, supposedly. So it was just not smart move for him for his future and a good teammate, which, the thing is, Red Bull's gone through how many people to find an actual decent teammate for him?
Yeah.
And now they've found it, and he's going to piss him off. Wow,
Yeah.
no, not
It's not a good
not
move.
clever, Max.
And
No.
like I said, it came across as so egregious because
Mhm.
it was a public manifestation of something that was very private
Yeah.
internally to the team, and we didn't know the whole story. And I think that comes across even worse, when
Mhm.
so Max should have thought that one through. That was a
Yep.
bad look for Max.
Yep.
Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas in P9, Joe Guan Yu P12. Valtteri actually looked punchy all weekend long,
Yeah.
and during the race, he was making some good pace on the softs. So he was on those softs, seemed to be running well, kind of like the Ferraris were. But he had that lockup during the safety car restart. I think, I don't know if he had a real bad flat spot or not, but that seemed to cost him some time. It cost him a place for sure. And at that point, I think he was just kind of struggling with grip. So I don't know if he just ran out of tire, if he got a flat spot, if that was a little off, but it was unfortunate because he had the advantage over the cars around him, or certainly behind him. But the safety car just kind of worked against him there.
It did. It did. Yeah, it was good to see Bottas up there again. Good to see the
Yeah, it
Alpha
was.
actually with a shot at it.
Yeah.
And it was, up until the end of the race, it was a handy car to have. And so
Yeah.
good that he still scored points.
Yep.
They need those points. Obviously, all the teams do.
Right.
Fighting for spots on the championship still. So good for him. It was great to see him drive hard, and the car was a little more lively than it's been.
Yep.
And I think just took the edge off the tire and didn't have anything to fight with.
Right. Joe had his drink system straw stuck in his helmet. And so that was a problem. And
Was that
then
the same straw that got stuck in Kimmy's helmet and was all over him?
oh yeah, do you remember that? Yeah.
No, is my drinking, is it emptying the bottle or not?
Yes, I do remember that. So then he suffered from some turbo issues, I guess, later in the race. So I didn't know that. I didn't know he was struggling with that. So a little off the pace, finished P12. In many ways, though, I think the team felt like, according to Fred, I think they felt like they executed well on the weekend. I mean, they weren't up, in fifth, sixth, but I think they felt like we executed as a team well. Didn't quite get the results from that execution. However, they did recover from a tougher weekend on Friday and Saturday. So they felt like they did execute and did come home with a point. So that was good. Yep. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll, and P10, Sebastian Vettel, P11. Seb seemed the quicker of the two, really, on the balance of the weekend, in my mind, and ran most of the race in the top 10. But late in the race, the safety car caught him out. So I benefited some, like Carlos Lewis, caught Seb out. He had older tires, so he let Lance through. So there's being magnanimous, right?
Yeah.
So he let Lance through for a point. And that's pretty nice of him, given that Lance damn near put him in the wall 24 hours earlier.
What does he say? Okay.
Yeah, I know. So despite him trying to run him off the road, so not bad race, but I kind of thought, at first blush, before that safety car kind of caught him out, I thought Seb could be, seventh, eighth. I thought maybe he'd be.
I think Seb had a great race. I mean, literally, it was just a safety car and the tire he had on at the place that had him fight his way backwards. But his driving, the pace of the car was good. Lance couldn't match him at all. And I think Lance benefited by having the fresher tires, and so he got the point. But I think by far Vettel was the better driver
for sure
for the Aston team this weekend.
Yeah, I remember them interviewing Lance after Saturday, and they were saying, the incident with Seb, running wide. And Lance goes, we talked about it, and I guess I didn't leave enough room. And that Lance didn't leave enough room. You drove him over to the wall.
You were on the white line. Your left was on the right. That might mean that Seb might not have enough room.
It wasn't the case. You didn't just leave him enough room. You literally drove him to the wall like Schumacher did to Barrichello. Come on, man.
Yeah. Now, has Lance ever beaten his teammate in a season? I was going to look that up and I didn't. But interesting to see if he's over a season. Has he been?
Oh, in total points.
In total by the end of the season, because Lance's driving.
That's a good question.
Something special, so to speak.
My jury's out with him. I just don't understand him.
Yeah, I don't understand him either. So, sometimes he can be okay, but for the most part, he's very up and down. But I can't imagine he's been able to put a season in to actually beat anyone that he's been driving.
Yeah,
in the same team.
I don't understand him on track, and I struggle to kind of get his vibe off track too. So I don't
Mr.
know.
Personality, no.
Yeah. AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, P14, Yuki Tsunoda, P17. Interesting story about Yuki. He started from the pit lane, having changed wings, but struggled most of the day to make any real gains. Yuki was told to stay put during the safety car, which means, folks, that not all the cars were allowed through to unlap themselves during the safety car. Now, that should have sent Mercedes into an apoplectic fit. The Mercedes fans should have been just losing it, right? Because they were so furious last year about that. Right.
Yeah.
But it was like that happened, and they were talking about it, and I was just I thought, oh man, Mercedes and Lewis fans are going to just hammer him. And I went on social media, and it was like, am I the only one noticing that Yuki didn't get to unlap and isn't?
And there was time for him to do it because Latifi was like dragging his feet. I don't know what he was doing, getting out lap. Everyone's like, "Oh, come on, Nicholas."
Yeah. I don't know what happened there and how they failed to do that. And this even what the FIA came out and said, "Oh no, we learned our lesson. We're going to unlap all cars." Remember that? They literally said that. That's, well, no, we're not going to, from here on out, we're going to unlap all cars until we get to Brazil. Then it's a shit show again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was bad. Pierre running top 10, but the mediums did not agree with this car. He got on those mediums very much like the Red Bull. It just didn't like those mediums. Funny it's a shame he didn't get another penalty though, Paul, because then he could have sat out the last race and went to Alpine next year with a fresh
started testing for Alpine somewhere. Yeah,
exactly. Yep, exactly. There was was it after Saturday they did call him up for the stewards, and I thought, oh, maybe Pierre was trying to force a penalty so he could just clean the slate,
Yeah.
See, if I was Pierre, I wrote this on the website, an article that I posted. If I was Pierre, just go to the FIA and say, hey, look, here's the deal, man. I don't want to hit the ground running with Alpine next year with just 2 points and screw them over. So here's the deal. I'll just set out Abu Dhabi. All right. Yeah. And you just wipe the points and we'll start fresh.
It's a long flight. I'm kind of tired.
It's a long flight. I'm not a big.
I got to get my new uniforms.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of the track. I'm not, so that's what I would do. Let's see. We talked about Haas, F1, Mick Schumacher, P13, Kevin Magnussen, a DNF, not of his making. No one will confront or punish Kevin with impunity. Kevin got punted off the road on the first lap by one Daniel Ricciardo, but Kevin kept his foot off the brake. The car rolled back into Dan's car as he tried to go around him, putting Dan out. So Kevin's like, oh, this is how we're going to do it? Yeah, no brake. Boom.
Yeah. Well, knowing Kevin, possibly, but I think Kevin was just trying to get the hell out of all the other cars.
Yeah, I think he was too. I think he was too. That was bad. Unfortunate. Mick was running toward the points, but as the quicker cars that were out of position kind of recovered, they just dropped him down. I thought, he may be able to pick up the baton from Kevin and maybe nip out a P10, P9 ish.
Yeah.
But once those recovering cars got through, he was pretty much done at that point. And then the rumors are flying all over the paddock that Nico Hülkenberg is set to replace Mick, which I find that interesting.
Yeah.
I like Nico. Don't get me wrong. I just think that's an interesting move for a host of reasons.
I think it's a lateral move at this point in time.
It is a lateral move.
Yeah.
And when Ferrari has young drivers and Haas would be looking at young drivers and there's other ones out there, maybe they've had a bum full of young drivers tearing up the cars.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Could be, but they got a major sponsor next year, so they're gonna have some more cash.
Yeah, right. So they'll have Dosh, right?
Yeah.
Let's see.
They won
Williams.
a major prize.
Shall we talk about Williams? Alex Albon, P15, Nicky Nicholas Latifi, P16. Alex started on hards, dumped those super quick, didn't he?
Yeah.
He was out there. Holy cow, this thing's a handful. He got off those immediately.
The only guy to have the hards.
Yeah, that was brave, Alex. Neither he nor Latifi made any real progress to the field. The safety car caught Alex out. did not help him. Never really could recover from that. And then Nicholas, he had flat spotted his tire. That may surprise you. And then he was nursing that from turn one, lap one. Had a very slow stop that cost him and put him down at 16. So, yeah, wasn't a banner day.
No, typical Williams weekend.
Yeah.
It sounds like to me.
Yeah, right. As much as Mercedes and had done well there, the Mercedes shove in the back of that Williams didn't do anything for the team.
Yeah, it just seems seems that weekend is rinse, lather, repeat again.
Yeah, right.
Albon overdoes himself.
Flurry. Yeah,
does flatters the car but can't hold on forever,
right.
and Latifi just kind of finishes the race.
Yeah, it really does. What can
They
you
can't
say?
be too excited being a Williams crew member at this point.
No, yeah, it's got to be tough.
Mm.
Speaking of tough, even tougher, let's talk about McLaren. Lando Norris DNF, Daniel Ricciardo DNF. Lando had a dippy tummy all weekend, Paul.
Yikes.
And that's never good. You hate to go into a race weekend with a dippy tummy. He still managed to run to the points until he punted Charles Leclerc. But Lando felt it was a racing incident. He said at best. He didn't
really
see. No, he didn't think he should have been penalized. Ultimately, he stopped with electrical issues. I think Ted said. And then Dan punted Kevin and then paid for it as Kevin rolled back into him in his race. At this point, Dan has one more race to see the back of the season. So
I'm sure another guy might go to the FIA. Couldn't I get more penalty points so I can just
not go to Abu Dhabi?
Yeah,
I know. Brutal.
Because it's embarrassing walking in the door at the work every day right now.
Yeah. What a dichotomy that is. Sepp going to Abu Dhabi, being celebrated last race. This is great. Dan going there. Oh, last race. It's tough being Dan. Yeah. All right, let's hand out some awards because this is what we do first. Awards, move of the race. Yes, sir, Paul. Move of the race. Who'd you have?
I'm giving it to Fernando Alonso.
Oh, one Fernando.
Many opportunities to find good passing moves by Alonso, but after that last restart, he's charged up the field.
Yeah,
it's fun to ride along with. Well done, Fernando.
Yeah, that was a great move.
Like bull.
Fed like bull. Let's see. I gave it to Carlos and Lewis both. Boxing under the safety car, seating that position, fresh tires, hunted down and annihilated Perez, held off for stop. And I think that was really a great move by the strategy team and Carlos and Lewis for executing. That made the podium for them.
Yep.
And so I think that was a good move. Lewis is concerned, as you would be. If I was Lewis in that car, I'd say, what the hell? Wait a minute. Tires are good, feel good. But what Lewis couldn't see is that they were covering Perez, right?
Yeah. Once again, just because Lewis said it doesn't mean it was the team was screwing him.
The team wasn't screwing him. They nailed it. The team nailed it. They called it right. So kudos to Mercedes. They worked their tail off. And a great result for that team this weekend with a win. So good for them. They should be excited and feel proud about that. Maybe not so much the social media department, but anyway. Let's see. Donkey of the race is the next one.
Good luck.
All right, Paul. Donkey of the race.
I got to give it to Max.
What?
He donkeyed on himself.
Max Verstappen?
Yes, the young Dutchman was a bit annoying out there today.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Yeah, I get your point. It was ham-fisted. That's for sure. I'm giving it to the FIA and the stewards for not unlapping Yuki, damn it.
Poor Yuki.
Poor Yuki. The Ukester. You would imagine the Ukester would have a lot of F-bombs for the FIA.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Can you imagine? Because at that restart, he just hung out.
Yeah,
I mean, he was toast.
He was probably, raising the finger to whichever steward is there this week.
Right. Yeah, so that's bad. So I'm going to give it, after the debacle last year, the profound statement, you're going to unlap all cars. And then this year, you don't unlap all the cars. So I don't know. Maybe there's a good explanation for it. I haven't heard it. And then finally, drive the race.
Get down.
It's in Lewis.
Yes, drive the race, Paul.
It's not Lewis. I'm
No.
giving it to Alonso again. 2 awards for Fernando Alonso. I think, yeah, just driving from where they started. I mean, Ocon had a great race too,
Yeah.
but Fernando was just on
What a
fire.
race.
And
What a
passing the
race.
Red Bull, how satisfied must he have been doing that? Passing the Red Bull on
Oh, I
track, pole
know.
position,
I know.
proper.
Yeah, it was a great race.
Yeah.
I'm giving it to George. He not just drive the race, drive the weekend. I mean, he's dominated the whole weekend, and is a great performance period. I just think it was great. You know, went out, qualified well, recovered, passed Max in a sprint race, won the sprint race, headed in, didn't put a foot wrong, led the whole Grand Prix, managed 2 restarts against a 7-time world champion.
Yeah,
Just
very
a
well.
great
He
race.
managed those restarts
Yeah, he
too.
did.
Okay,
Yeah,
that was
yeah, did a great job. So kudos, George. That's mine. All right, let's do some mailbag.
You've got mail.
First up is Dennis from Sweden. Hey, Dennis from Sweden.
Hey.
My wife
If
is
I knew
part
how to
Swedish.
say welcome in Swedish, I would have said it right then, but I don't.
Yeah.
Maybe go ask your wife.
She would probably know.
So I think she does.
She's had Ludwig, so and survived. Yikes. Dennis from Sweden says, hello, I'm listening to lots of podcasts about F1, being an F1 fan since the beginning of 1980s. Hey, a veteran. I have to say that you guys make the best podcast. Oh, thanks, Dennis. Very nice of you to say. Representing all the teams, which is what we're doing now, all the drivers, which is what we're doing now. Never forget the people who made this sport what it is. Yes. Ronnie Peterson, notwithstanding. Yay, Ronnie Peterson. In the Lotus, the latest podcast, Robocalls, is from another Dennis. He says, keep up the good work. So Dennis, thanks so much. That means a lot. We're a Yankee podcast, and to have we have a lot of international listeners, and it's always great to hear from all of you. Whether it's Gigi the cat in Australia, Dennis from Sweden, Lewis from the Netherlands. It's great to hear from all of you, and I love talking to all of you. And you're very, very kind in saying that. And thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate it. Lee says, not a question. I'm just astounded that nobody has said this yet. Paul, you can get the Sky commentary on F1 TV. Press the button that gives you the list of driver radios and switch the audio track to international.
No, I've heard that. But here's the deal. Here's the problem. And I tried it again. Is that on my iPhone, as soon as you press play, you cannot slide those icons out. If I was on my computer, I could do it, but usually it seems to work better just playing from F1 TV out on my iPhone than it does from my computer. So once that started, I can't do it. Then I have to stop and then go back. And I don't know, it's never worked on my iPhone to be able to find the icons to switch the thing. And I hold, some kind of martyrdom for listening to the F1T. So we have something more to talk about, right? You can complain about Crofty. I can complain about whoever those people are. I'm not sure where they're from, but everyone's seeing it from a different side. So I kind of do it on purpose, just so we got another side to the commentary saga.
Yeah. In shortly, he's taking it for the team. He listens. We can have a much more diverse experience for you, taking in more sides and more commentary from broadcast. He's doing it as a professional.
And I would say it's been suffering worse recently because I don't know where Ben Collins, no, not Ben Collins. Anyway, they had a proper commentator on there, but for the last 2 races, Will Buxton has been the main color commentator.
That's right.
And that is painful.
It's tough.
I will tell you truthfully.
It's tough. And I think Will would be the first person to tell you that that's not an easy job, right? Lee Diffie would tell you that.
No, it's not an easy job, but he's not actually very good at it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Will's good at some things. He's
great.
He's an avid Formula One racing fan.
Oh yeah,
crazy.
Absolutely.
Has a lot of knowledge, but a color commentator lead is not his forte.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's like I was saying, it's like the Naomi that they kind of plucked her out of Formula W, just threw her into a global broadcast, and she's not a broadcaster. you know,
Definitely not.
adding nothing to the commentary.
Definitely
And it's difficult because you got Simon there asking Naomi, and then Martin Brundle, who is the Delphic Oracle for their, as far as their commentary team goes.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, that's a tough combination, you know, and Martin very, you know, delicately tries not to contradict, but that's tough, you know.
Yeah.
I was intrigued to see if Sam Collins thought, you know, because he's a big Lewis fan. So I was intrigued to see what he'd say about the incident. Sam agrees with us. He thought it was more Lewis's fault. So there you go.
Wow. There's a shocker.
Impartiality, Sam. I'm all for it. Way to go, buddy.
Yeah.
I like
Everyone
it.
except Derek Warwick, apparently.
Yeah, Derek Warwick is, yeah, that's not a good combination. Steve asked this. I really enjoyed the sprint race in Sao Paulo, and it got me thinking, how many sprint races should there be in a season? I hear that there will be 6 next year, but is that too many or not enough? Keen to hear your thoughts, as I'm undecided. As an aside, I'll be stateside Miami Beach next week, so we'll probably miss the final race in Abu Dhabi. Will be hard sell dragging my better half to the sports bar in the morning, and while I have an appreciation for and I will have an appreciation for the U.S. based fans that get up so early and watch so many races. Yeah, that's our life, Steve.
Well,
That's
it is
what
on
we do.
ESPN, so he can probably get in his hotel room. He just
Yeah,
has to,
you wouldn't have to go to the
put
bar.
some blinkers on your eye, on your
Yeah.
wife's eyes and some in her ears, so she don't wake her up.
Right.
You know, you can do it.
Yeah, I think 6 sprint races is too much. That's my opinion.
Yeah,
unless
well,
they tweak it to make it better.
Yeah, exactly. That's the
Yeah.
point. I don't want any more than we've got, really. Anyway,
Yeah.
but if they're
Yeah.
gonna do them, let's make it in a manner where everyone can let their hair down and go for it.
Yeah,
which
I
is
agree.
what everyone thinks the sprint race should be.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Miles asks, can you talk a bit about tire management? We had quali sessions where the soft tire goes off during the lap, but they are able to race 1/3 distance on it during the race with full tanks. How can both be true? How can you tell while driving how much life you're taking out of your tires? Also, my least favorite words to hear on a broadcast are, we're in the tire management phase of the Grand Prix now.
Yeah, that is
Me
bad.
too, Miles.
Was it the US Grand Prix? Had a really,
Yeah.
like, half the race was time management.
Yeah. What should F1 do with tire regs going forward?
Okay, well, it's a good question on,
It
on
is a
the
great
on the
question.
tires. Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, with the tires not lasting a lap, it's not that they're not lasting, that they've basically run out of rubber. It's they've lost their maximum ability to grip the car on the ground, which is ultimately what you're doing on a qualifying lap. And usually it's about overheating the tire. We talk about tire pressure and temperature a lot with tires, and there's an optimum level. And when you're
What they
going
call
for
the
one,
window.
a very narrow window
Mhm.
of where everything's at its peak at the right time, right? The internal temperature, the external temperature, the tire pressure, everything is at its peak. That does not last very long at all. And when you're trying
And
to
it's
put a qualifying
designed that
lap,
way, right, Paul? Pirelli designs them that way.
yeah, well, supposedly that was, but most tires are kind of like that. Most tires have that place.
Yeah.
Whether that window is how big is
Wider
place,
window. Yeah.
right? But in Formula One, the window, that kind of window is always very narrow, because 0.2 of a second lost is an eternity on a qualifying lap, right?
Right.
So basically, it's, can you manage the tire enough in that lap so you don't go above and beyond too far over that limit? But even in the qualifying, they're still managing how much they're pushing in corner 1, 2, and 3. So when they get to corners 15, 16, 17 to finish the lap, they're not way over that peak where they're losing any performance out of the car that they gain from the first few corners. So
right.
It's just about ultimate single lap time, not that the tires are destroyed and gone and you couldn't use them again.
Right.
So when they set the tire pressures up, when they set the car up, when they set the driver's strategy for driving their stint on that same tire, it's a completely different way of driving to manage, protect the tire, which is what they're not doing on a qualifying lap.
Right.
So.
Right. And Paul, how can you tell while driving how much life you're taking out of your tires?
That's experience. That's experience over the races, over the practices. to know when it's about just a little bit too much tire pressure, or you're taking life out of the tires, meaning your driving style can very much change. We've talked about Jensen Button being quiet on the tires, right? It's about how much input you're giving in, and how much feel does the driver have to what their inputs are actually doing to the tire. And that's a very big skill that some drivers have much better than others.
Yeah. And
so how do you
seen
tell that
develop,
every
too.
driver has something different? Yeah.
You've seen that develop too. I would think, who can I use it? Well, Lewis, I think, is a good example. When he came into the sport, the tires were, they're
Yeah.
an anomaly, right?
Yeah. Even Charles Leclerc, remember?
Yeah,
more
Charles
recently,
Leclerc,
right?
perfect example too. Lewis and Charles both. But Lewis now is fantastic at tire management and utilizing the tires. Sergio Perez is typically pretty good. Charles Leclerc gotten a lot better, really focused on that. A lot. So and there's other drivers that never can quite seem to get on top of it.
Right.
I think Kimi struggled with it. I think Daniel Ricciardo struggles with it. There's other drivers that just, it's so foreign to the way that they came up through the series racing. That's what kind of makes it interesting with Alonso, because he didn't grow up with these kind of tires, and that's not how he learned how to drive, right?
Right.
So for him to be able to adapt is kind of interesting. So anyway, it's a great question.
when we made that, was it 2013 we made the tire switch?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, Jensen Button was one of them, that struggled to get their head around how to make these tires work, how to switch them on, and how not to overuse them. And so even the best drivers in the world can struggle, and they may be more suited to the Michelins that they could just pound on every lap, and they got used to that. Then when we made that transition to the Pirellis and the HD tires, etc., it's definitely a challenge that some drivers can get to, but it's really a lot of work, and a lot of internal looking inside yourself and feeling what you're doing to the car and how that affects where the car will be in 2-3 laps, rather than just in that corner at that moment in time.
And to your point, Miles, about what F1 should do with the tires going forward, I mean, if you didn't want a lot of tire management and stuff, you'd make wider windows, you'd make more durable tires, less degradation. What they call tire deg, you'd make them more durable, they last longer. You would just open it up and make a durable tire for a race. One, have more grip, kind of like what IndyCar does with the res and black bands. Just a more durable tire, one softer, doesn't last quite as long, has more grip, but you wouldn't play around with super narrow windows and certain temperatures and those kind of things, which are pretty advanced technology, which Pirelli does. But if you didn't want to lose that innovation cycle around tires, then you would do what they used to do, which is a tire war. You bring in another tire supplier. So you bring in, Bridgestone, Michelin, somebody else to compete against Pirelli, and then it's gloves off, trying to find the fastest, most durable tire. And there's a lot of people that don't want that. They like the Pirelli sole supplier concept.
And I think Formula One like the way that they can control
it,
the cars by the tire, and they've definitely got a partner in Pirelli doing that with them.
They do. Yeah. So, and I'm not, taking the stuffing out of Pirelli. They make a great tire. I've owned several, but anyway, yeah. So it's a great question, Miles. Appreciate it. All right, that does it for this podcast. But don't be alarmed, because Paul and I will be back next weekend to review the last race of the 2022 season from Abu Dhabi. How about that, Paul?
Yeah, fireworks. I'm expecting fireworks.
Yes, I'm expecting Max to pull right over for Sergio.
The great bit, I'm sure there's going to be just the whole crowd is going to be, just crying their eyes out, saying farewell to that Latifi, I
mean, right. Right. Shane, don't go. Yeah. Yes. Oh boy. Yep. And then, who knows? And then you're gonna have Marco helmet over at AlphaTauri looking at Pierre saying,
goodbye, good luck, and good riddance.
There you go. It's over. All over. All right. Well, if you want to share your opinion with us, you can do that by going to theparcferme.com. Share your opinion. Just do it to quorum civility, as always. That's why the website exists. That's why this podcast exists. So we're going to get a bunch of stooges in there flaming and trolling everybody. If you like the podcast, you can go to iTunes, give us a good rating over there, give us some love over there. We always appreciate that. A huge thank you to our Patreon supporters, because we could not, and quite honestly wouldn't do this podcast if it wasn't for our existing Patreon supporters. It ebbs and flows a little bit. It's kind of down now on the support side, but we couldn't do this podcast without you. So if you're interested in being a Patreon supporter, you go to our website, bottom left side of our website, and you scroll all the way down, you'll see that, or at the top right, you'll see a link to support us over at Patreon. We'd appreciate that. A huge thank you to those that continue just to support us through PayPal as well. Very kind of you. Indeed. And been doing it a long time. So with that, we will be back, Paul, next week, and we'll do it all over again. And until that time, this is Todd, aka Negative Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.